Hey everyone! Tonight, we're stepping into a world most will never see, the hidden corridors of intelligence, where every shadow has a name, and every name carries a secret. In the years after Kosovo, the Middle East was a tinderbox, and a single misstep could ignite chaos. And in the middle of it all were unseen eyes, tracking networks that no one else could touch. This is Operation Northern Watch Redux. To some, it was a quiet, surgical success. To others, a warning of how easily the shadows can slip through even the tightest surveillance. Before we dive in, go ahead and hit like and subscribe, only if you genuinely crave stories from the hidden corners of global intelligence. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is. I love seeing who's awake in the dark, tracking the secrets alongside us. Now, settle in. Let the world outside fade for a moment. Tonight, we're traveling back to a time when London's analysts and field operatives in Beirut were racing against unseen adversaries. A double agent was bending truth, and an unknown operative moved like a ghost through the networks that shaped global terror threats. This is the story of covert eyes, hidden betrayals, and the intelligence battles that never made the headlines. The message came through the secure lines with the kind of quiet urgency that made every operative in the room sit up a little straighter, the hum of computers and faint clatter of keyboards suddenly irrelevant. London, late 1999, was already bracing against the subtle tremors of a world unsettled by Kosovo. But this was different. The encrypted dispatch hinted at movements in the Middle East, networks rising like dark clouds across the horizon, threads of coordination and financing that no single agency could fully trace. MI6's liaison in London leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled, eyes scanning the stream of data cascading across his terminal. Somewhere in Beirut, an informant whispered of meetings in shadowed alleyways, suspicious shipments crossing borders under the cover of night, and voices that spoke in code and menace. Across the room, another officer murmured, "They're organizing faster than we expected. We can't afford a misstep." Outside, the rain-slick streets mirrored the unease inside, a city unaware of the invisible chessboard being laid beyond its skyline. Satellite feeds flickered to life, revealing clusters of vehicles moving through desert corridors with almost casual precision. Yet each movement told a story of intent and discipline that made the analysts' stomachs tighten. Every intercepted message, every shadowed signal hinted at coordination that spanned continents, yet tangible proof remained elusive, a constant tension threading through the very air they breathed. The liaison's phone buzzed, a HUMINT report from an asset deep in Amman, mentioning a meeting that would convene leaders from multiple cells, each unaware of how closely they were being watched. The clock was ticking. No one could predict what would happen if these threads wove into action before they could unravel them. The weight of responsibility pressed down on everyone in the room. They were guardians of a world that didn't know it was under siege, and failure was a luxury they could not afford. Somewhere, halfway across the globe, a single operative adjusted his disguise, readying to slip unnoticed into a city pulsing with danger, carrying information that could tilt the balance of intelligence in favor of those who worked in silence. The web was expanding, the stakes rising, and for the men and women of MI6, every second counted as they traced movements invisible to most eyes, each signal a pulse in the larger, shadowed heartbeat of what was quietly becoming one of the most consequential intelligence operations of the era. The satellite feed blinked to life just as the first hints of dawn crept over the desert horizon, painting the barren sands in muted gold and copper. Yet there was no warmth in the sterile screens of the MI6 Operations Center. Analysts leaned in, eyes scanning for the subtle movement that could betray hours of planning. A convoy slipping along forgotten roads, the silent rhythm of a network that prided itself on invisibility. The image shifted, pixels revealing dust trails where vehicles hugged the shadows of dunes, and the officers holding their breath felt the weight of every second. Somewhere beneath the swirl of dust and the hidden paths of the desert, Meetings were being convened, instructions whispered in languages that carried the gravity of intention, but none of the participants could see the watching eyes that followed every movement. A secure line buzzed in the corner. "Target convoy east of Baalbek, heading toward the Bekaa Valley," said the voice of an analyst, tense, barely audible over the hum of cooling fans and the chatter of computers. The liaison's hand hovered over the console, fingers twitching, as if even a slight touch could alter the outcome. "Track every vehicle, coordinates updated, SIGINT is picking up chatter, frequency hopping, encrypted, but we're beginning to see a pattern." Every officer in the room understood the import. This was not routine surveillance. The pattern hinted at more than mere smuggling. The network was coordinating, converging, expanding, its threads reaching beyond the immediate geography into corridors of power and terror that none of them fully understood. Across the Mediterranean, an operative crouched beneath the shadow of an abandoned warehouse, ears straining to catch the cadence of voices inside. He had been there for hours, disguised as a laborer, his movements calculated, each breath measured. A slip could mean death, or worse, the compromise of months of intelligence painstakingly collected. He tapped his earpiece lightly, whispering, "Eyes on the meeting," confirming 3 key figures present. Movement patterns matched satellite intel. A response crackled softly. "Good. Keep it steady. We're feeding coordinates to London. Do not engage until cleared." In that single instruction lay the tension of the operation. Too early, and the network would scatter. Too late, and the opportunity would vanish, perhaps forever. The desert itself seemed to conspire against observation. Heat waves distorted images, dust and wind hid footprints, and every shadow was both ally and adversary. Analysts back in London matched the eavesdropped conversations against patterns from the satellite feed, cross-referencing shipments, cell phone pings, and a sparse constellation of field agents planted like chess pieces across the region. The liaison leaned over the mapping software, tracing potential escape routes and fallback positions, imagining the calculation that a leader of the network must be making even now. Each decision in that room reverberated across continents, silent and unseen, yet carrying consequences that could echo for years. Suddenly, a HUMINT update arrived from an asset embedded in Amman. The message was terse. "Unscheduled arrival of unknown operative at meeting, appears trained, may have foreign support." The room froze. Unknown operatives were the most dangerous variable. Any miscalculation could reveal the entire surveillance net. The liaison instructed quietly but firmly. "Update all satellite vectors, track approach routes, determine point of origin, this is priority 1. Fingers danced across keyboards, mouse clicks echoed in rapid bursts as digital overlays updated the live feeds. Yet, even as the analyst worked, a cold awareness settled in their minds. The desert, the networks, the timing, all of it was a living puzzle, and a single misstep could shatter the careful balance. In Beirut, the operative inside the meeting shifted slightly, sensing eyes on him that could not be seen. He glanced at the small notebook concealed in his jacket, scanning code words written in fading ink, a lifeline to MI6 handlers miles away. Every detail mattered: the hand gestures, the cadence of speech, even the placement of cups on the table. All could betray the intent, reveal hierarchy, expose alliances. And yet, beneath the calculated calm, his pulse raced. He was one man among many, a single thread in a web stretching across countries, continents, intelligence agencies, and hidden agendas. If caught, he would be erased from existence. If successful, he would become part of an intelligence triumph few would ever know existed. Back in London, analysts cross-referenced the satellite coordinates with intercepted communications. The picture was starting to take shape, but still incomplete. Some assets reported seeing logistical support convoys supplying arms and communication devices, while SIGINT revealed encrypted discussions of meetings in undisclosed locations. One of the senior officers muttered, "They're synchronizing in ways we haven't seen before, not just cells, regional coordination. The liaison's jaw tightened. This was beyond what most intelligence officers had trained for. The operation demanded perfection, but perfection was a mirage. Human error, technological glitches, unforeseen betrayals, they were all threats hovering over every decision. Hours stretched, convoys shifted, vehicles merged with traffic, dust trails faded. The operative in the field remained motionless, a shadow among shadows, eavesdropping on instructions that could spark global reverberations. A coded exchange confirmed leadership presence, a key planner whose identity could unlock entire chains free of operations, yet no one in the meeting suspected a single breath that was being monitored from thousands of miles away. Somewhere, satellites adjusted their focus, capturing not just movement, but subtle cues. Which buildings were reinforced, which paths avoided, patterns of comings and goings that could hint at broader networks. The fusion of technology and human instinct became a delicate dance. One misstep, and the entire operation would unravel like smoke in the wind. A sudden ping in the system drew all eyes. Signals analysts noticed an anomaly, a burst of communication that didn't fit the expected pattern. Frequencies shifted in a way that suggested outside coordination, possibly a foreign intelligence hand or a rogue operative within the network. The liaison leaned in, whispering almost to himself, "Someone's moving faster than we predicted, or someone knows we're watching." The tension thickened. Even seasoned officers could feel the constriction in their chests. The desert miles away might seem empty, but it was alive with intent, strategy, and the invisible chess pieces of global espionage. The operative inside the meeting noticed the subtle disruption. A sudden pause in conversation, a glance that lingered too long. His mind raced. Was it a signal, a trap, or a coincidence? Every instinct screamed caution, but hesitation could be fatal. He adjusted his earpiece slightly, sending a whispered update. Anomaly detected? Possible breach of pattern. Recommend recalibration of observation angles and contingency planning. Back in London, the liaison received it instantly and issued instructions with calm urgency. Do not engage. Continue monitoring. Cross-check SIGINT with HUMINT in 3 minutes. Update satellite overlays. The room hummed with nervous energy. The digital maps glowed with lines of data, each a potential key to unraveling the sprawling web of coordination. Time became both ally and enemy. Each passing second could either expose the operative in Beirut or reveal the entire network to MI6 before it acted. Analysts traced the unusual signals, cross-referencing historic patterns, noticing similarities to previous intelligence failures in other regions. The realization struck slowly but sharply. This network was adaptive, learning, evolving, and it was testing them as much as they were testing it. Every decoded message, every drone ping, every whispered report was part of a larger puzzle whose edges constantly shifted. By mid-afternoon, a pattern emerged. Satellite overlays revealed multiple convoys converging at a previously unnoticed location, an abandoned industrial site on the outskirts of the valley. Field HUMINT confirmed movement consistent with high-level meetings. The liaison's fingers tapped rapidly over the keyboard as he coordinated with allied agencies. Confirm vehicle IDs, track all exits, estimate timing of assembly, prepare for potential intervention if actionable intel confirms threat escalation. Every operator in the room felt the gravity of the moment. Years of planning, human lives, geopolitical consequences, all balanced on a sequence of digital images, coded messages, and real-time observation. And then, as if the desert itself held its breath, a revelation arrived. One of the operatives in the field reported an unexpected visitor at the rendezvous, someone moving with practiced stealth and carrying markers consistent with foreign intelligence training. The implications were immediate, jarring. The network they had been tracking was not just coordinating internally. It had external support, an unseen hand guiding its movements. The room fell silent. Even the most experienced analysts understood the stakes. The presence of a trained, unknown operative could compromise everything, turning months of surveillance into a race against time. The liaison exhaled slowly, voice barely a whisper. We're watching shadows in motion, but one shadow is moving too quickly, too deliberately. Prepare contingencies. Every eye stays on this until we know what it's capable of. Outside, the desert sun dipped toward evening, and the operative crouched beneath the warehouse, eyes sharp, pulse steady, knowing that in the next few hours, decisions made in London and actions taken in Beirut would define the trajectory of an invisible war whose consequences no one could yet predict. Somewhere in the haze, a single thought hung over the operation. The network was learning, adapting, and evolving. But so were they. Every signal, every movement, every breath counted. And in this intricate web of observation, every second brought them closer to either exposure or breakthrough. The line between triumph and catastrophe thinner than a desert mirage. Night settled over the desert like a velvet shroud, swallowing the last hints of heat while leaving trails of tension in its wake. The operative crouched behind the abandoned warehouse, every muscle coiled like a spring, eyes scanning the dim outlines of vehicles and shadows that flickered under the moonlight. He could feel the desert shifting around him, a living entity that both concealed and revealed in equal measure, while every distant transmission, every crackle on the earpiece, carried the weight of unseen consequences. London had fed coordinates hours earlier, their lines of communication now humming with anticipation. Yet, the operative knew that no map, no satellite, no analyst could feel the heat of desert wind on his neck or hear the subtle click of boots on gravel in the same way he could. Back at the MI6 Operations Center, analysts hunched over displays tracing the patterns emerging from the multi-agency data streams. Every convoy, every signal, every field update had to be integrated in real time. SIGINT was picking up frequency hops that suggested coordination between previously unlinked cells, each transmission carefully masked, yet enough fragments leaked through to hint at broader plans. One officer, fingers hovering above the keyboard, muttered to himself, "They're layering the signals, testing us, seeing how fast we react. They know someone is watching." His voice barely carried over the low hum of the room, yet it hung in the air, heavy with the understanding that intelligence was not just about gathering facts, but anticipating the intentions of minds trained to deceive. In Beirut, the operative adjusted his position, sliding along the shadows to keep the warehouse between him and the street. Inside, voices spoke in measured tones, a mix of Arabic and code words that carried instructions with lethal precision. He could sense the hierarchy at work, subtle gestures marking command, small pauses punctuating importance. Every syllable, every breath mattered, and he recorded it all silently, storing memory and microcassette alike for the analysts who would decode its significance. He knew that the slightest misstep, an inadvertent glance, a too loud shuffle, could compromise not only him, but the months of surveillance feeding back into London. Signals analysts noticed a sudden spike in traffic from an unexpected sector, a burst of encrypted chatter that didn't match any known pattern. The liaison leaned over the console, tracing overlays, cross-referencing satellite imagery with HUMINT reports. "Possible movement in the northern quadrant," he said quietly, eyes narrowing. "Could be diversionary, could be a new cell joining the network. Either way, we need eyes on it now." Within moments, operatives in Europe and the Middle East received coded instructions, deploying drones, repositioning assets, and tracking potential infiltrators who could turn the operation on its head. The coordination was intricate, a symphony of silent movements conducted across time zones, each instrument dependent on the other, yet vulnerable to a single wrong note. In the desert, the operative noticed a figure moving along a ridge, blending into shadows as though born of them. Training and instinct screamed caution. He whispered into the earpiece, voice low, "Unknown approaching, possibly trained, tracking now." London responded almost immediately. "Confirm ID. Do not engage unless positive confirmation of hostile intent. Coordinates feeding live." Every word carried the weight of responsibility. Misidentification could trigger a cascade of errors. He watched as the figure moved with deliberate precision, approaching the rendezvous site the convoy had been moving toward all day. The realization struck him. This network had its own eyes, its own unseen operatives, and now the hunters had become targets of observation themselves. The clock moved with oppressive weight. Convoys merged, sidestepped into secondary routes, a dance choreographed to evade detection, yet leaving faint traces for those who knew where to look. Analysts in London worked furiously, cross-checking vehicle IDs, movement patterns, and signal bursts. Each layer peeled back revealed further complexity: cell-to-cell coordination across borders, hidden depots of supplies, and contingency plans that suggested the network had been evolving for months. One analyst whispered, "They're learning from us. Every time we track, they adapt." The room fell silent for a moment, the collective awareness of being in a mind game against invisible opponents hanging like a shadow over their shoulders. The operative in Beirut observed subtle interactions at the meeting: hand gestures, glances, slight repositioning of individuals that hinted at hidden hierarchies. One man appeared to be the linchpin, directing movements without words, his authority silent but palpable. The operative recorded everything, noting potential vulnerabilities, patterns of security, and signals of loyalty that could be exploited later. A sudden shift in behavior caught his attention. One of the participants briefly glanced toward a window, the pause almost imperceptible, yet enough to suggest suspicion. The operative's pulse quickened. Was it coincidence, or had they noticed something amiss? Every second felt stretched, each heartbeat echoing in his chest like a warning drum. Meanwhile, in London, the liaison received another HUMINT update. A source in Amman reported unusual activity along supply routes, suggesting the network was moving assets in anticipation of future operations. Satellite imagery corroborated the claim, showing vehicles altering paths in ways that indicated foreknowledge. "They've got a contingency we didn't expect," he murmured, voice tight. "Adjust tracking, predict next moves, alert field teams." Analysts worked feverishly, overlaying multiple data sets, noting discrepancies and updating live maps that shifted with every new piece of intelligence. The tension was unrelenting. A miscalculation here could compromise the operation, endanger lives, and allow the network to gain the upper hand. Hours passed like minutes. In the field, the operative maneuvered closer, listening, recording, memorizing. Every detail was critical: the cadence of voices, the placement of vehicles, the timing of comings and goings. He noted a courier who appeared repeatedly, moving between meetings with papers and electronic devices, his presence almost imperceptible but vital. Back in London, analysts pieced together his role, recognizing him as a key logistical node, a potential vulnerability that could unravel part of the network if exploited. The liaison leaned forward, jaw clenched, calculating the risk and reward in real time, understanding that every decision now carried consequences far beyond the desert. Then, an anomaly appeared, a burst of signals from a direction previously unmonitored. The operative noticed subtle movements in the sand, a shadow breaking formation, the faint crunch of boots that did not belong to the expected participants. London pinged alerts. New actor detected, unknown affiliation, could be trained, adjust surveillance vectors, do not engage. The air in the operations center thickened with anticipation. Even veteran analysts felt the cold grip of adrenaline as they realized the network had an unanticipated layer, someone external, perhaps foreign-trained, moving within the web they thought they understood. The operative's instincts screamed caution. He repositioned, slipping behind a sand dune to maintain concealment, yet eyes never leaving the ridge. Every nerve was attuned to movement, every sense alert to anomaly. The unknown figure approached the convoy assembly point with precision that suggested preparation, knowledge, and intent. London's analysts cross-referenced satellite overlays with previous SIGINT patterns, noticing subtle deviations. The figure's path avoided detection cones, suggesting insider understanding or prior intelligence. The liaison tapped rapidly on the console, directing field assets to monitor multiple ingress points, aware that one misstep could blow the entire operation. Tension rose to a tangible level. Convoys halted briefly, drivers exchanging signals that suggested awareness of surveillance, yet their actions remained consistent with the anticipated patterns. The operatives' pulse matched the rhythm of distant signals, a symphony of shadows and whispers. Back in London, analysts began cross-linking data points from multiple assets, tracing the unknown operatives' possible affiliations, considering contingencies that had never before been necessary in similar missions. Each speculation carried risk. Every update could trigger a chain of operational adjustments that, if mishandled, might alert the network to their observation. By midnight, the picture was clearer, yet more alarming. The unknown operative integrated seamlessly with the convoy, moving with confidence and purpose. The operative in Beirut maintained his distance, recording, memorizing, updating the earpiece feed with every motion. London responded with rapid overlay adjustments, feeding positional coordinates to allied agencies while preparing contingency protocols. Analysts recognized the threat. If the external operative was aligned with the network, he could redirect logistics, compromise planned surveillance, or introduce counterintelligence measures that would unravel months of painstaking work. The detention in the desert thickened as the operative witnessed subtle changes. A door left slightly ajar, a glance exchanged between two men, the shifting weight of a vehicle, that suggested covert communication. London's liaison understood the stakes in real time, sending encrypted instructions: maintain observation, record anomalies, reconfirm asset positions, prepare for extraction if necessary. Analysts worked in unison, a chorus of calculation and anticipation, each aware that a single misjudgment could nullify the entire operation. Hours dragged, stretching every second into an eternity. The unknown operative moved with careful precision, blending with shadows, avoiding detection by both human and technological surveillance. Signals analysts noticed unusual patterns in encrypted communications, timing mismatches, and altered frequencies. The liaison leaned over the console, whispering almost to himself, "This isn't routine. This is preparation. Something is coming." The weight of the statement settled over everyone in the operations center. Every piece of intelligence, every satellite ping, every whispered field report now carried the potential to tip the balance between containment and catastrophe. As dawn approached, the desert remained tense and silent, yet alive with hidden motion. The operative in Beirut observed the convoy and the unknown figure maneuvering with purpose, every detail a potential key to unraveling the network. London continued to integrate HUMINT, SIGINT, and satellite intelligence, tracing movement patterns, recalculating probabilities, and preparing contingencies. The network had revealed an unexpected layer of sophistication, yet the operatives and analysts were relentless, adapting in real time, minds and machines synchronized in a race against time that spanned continents. The section closes on an unresolved precipice. The unknown operative's role remains ambiguous, the network's intentions partially revealed, and the stakes higher than ever. Observers in London and the field understand that one critical decision, one overlooked detail, could shift the outcome of the operation, and the next hours would determine whether months of surveillance culminated in success or catastrophe. The desert stretched beneath a moonless sky, silent except for the distant hum of engines and the occasional crackle of a radio transmission. The unknown operative had vanished into shadows, as if the night itself had swallowed him, leaving the field operative in Beirut tense but undeterred, every sense sharpened to a razor's edge. London's analysts watched the shifting satellite overlays, noting subtle deviations in vehicle patterns and movement that hinted at an intelligence the field teams could not yet see. The network they had been tracking was no longer predictable. It had grown adaptive, evolving as though it were aware of being watched, testing the limits of observation, probing for weaknesses, and daring them to respond. From the rooftop of a nearby building, another MI6 asset observed a separate convoy, the headlights barely visible against the blackened terrain. He adjusted binoculars, scanning the vehicles for anything out of place, any sign that the network's leadership was coordinating movements in real time. The operative in Beirut whispered into his earpiece, updating the London liaison. Secondary convoy confirmed, multiple high-value targets, possible cross-border coordination. London responded instantly. Overlay new SIGINT with HUMINT feeds, confirm patterns, maintain visual, do not engage. The instructions were calm, almost clinical, but the tension in the room was palpable. Every second mattered, every observation carried weight, and the thought of a single misstep hung over them like a storm cloud ready to break. The operative shifted, noticing subtle movements within the convoy. A courier emerged from a rear vehicle, briefcase in hand, moving with deliberate precision toward an inconspicuous building on the outskirts of the industrial zone. Satellite feeds corroborated the motion, showing a tight sequence of arrivals and departures that suggested a hierarchy of operations, a choreography invisible to casual observers, but obvious to trained eyes. Analysts whispered to one another, mapping nodes and connections, feeding positional data to other field teams. Each movement carried meaning, and every detail was a potential key to unraveling a network that had so far remained just beyond their grasp. A sudden burst of encrypted communication drew their attention. Signals analysts leaned forward, eyes narrowing, as they attempted to decode the rapid sequence of transmissions. The frequencies shifted, overlapped, and hopped in ways that suggested deliberate obfuscation. The liaison in London murmured, "They're testing us. Someone knows we're watching." His words sent a ripple of tension through the room. The network was not only operational but cunning, adapting with each monitored signal, each observation, each calculated response from MI6 and its allies. In Beirut, the field operative watched the courier disappear into the building, noting every movement, every minor hesitation. A slight pause at the doorway, a glance over the shoulder, a shift in gait, all signs that could indicate either caution or recognition of surveillance. He adjusted his position, crawling to a lower vantage point, whispering updates into the earpiece, careful not to disturb the delicate balance of observation. London received the update instantly. Confirm identities, cross-check prior SIGINT, maintain overwatch on ingress and egress points. Analysts moved in synchronized precision, tracking movements, predicting potential rendezvous, and calculating risks. Hours passed with a relentless tension. The operative crouched in the shadows as voices filtered from the building, each word a clue, each phrase a piece of the sprawling puzzle. Somewhere inside, leadership strategized, unaware of the thousands of eyes tracing their decisions from continents away. London coordinated with allied agencies, exchanging intel with the CIA and DGSE, the flow of information constant, encrypted, and lethal in its precision. Analysts cross-referenced field reports, satellite imagery, and intercepted communications, forming a digital map of the network that stretched from urban centers to isolated desert routes. Then came the first near miss. A local vehicle, unaccounted for in any satellite or HUMINT data, veered too close to the operative's observation post. He froze, heart hammering, as the headlights swept past, illuminating his position for a fraction of a second. Training took over. He adjusted, melting into the shadows, and whispered a terse update. Compromised visual, maintaining cover, alternate observation point engaged. London acknowledged the report immediately, rerouting surveillance assets to maintain a full picture of the network while minimizing risk to operatives in the field. In the building, subtle signals passed between participants, hand gestures, small movements, and pauses in conversation indicating command and attention. The operative recorded every detail, noting anomalies, repetitions, and behaviors inconsistent with expected protocol. London's liaison cross-referenced these with historical HUMINT profiles, identifying potential leadership figures and operational nodes. The analyst's fingers flew across keyboards, overlaying satellite imagery with field observations, mapping potential escape routes, and preparing contingency plans. Each moment was a delicate balance of action and restraint. One wrong move could compromise months of intelligence gathering. Another unexpected variable emerged. From the eastern approach, a figure appeared, moving swiftly along a concealed path. The operative's instincts flared. This was not a known asset, not a member of the convoy, not anyone previously identified. He whispered urgently, "Unknown operative approaching, possible foreign trained, monitoring movement." London responded immediately, "Track, do not engage, feed live coordinates, update overlay with potential threat vectors." Analysts recalculated trajectories, field agents adjusted positions, and the web of surveillance expanded to include this new, unaccounted presence. Every second, the network adapted, testing the observers as much as they observed. The night deepened, shadows lengthening, while the operative tracked movements inside the building. Small details revealed hierarchy: who issued commands without speaking, who deferred subtly, who monitored the others for loyalty. The unknown operative approached a rear entrance, blending with shadows, suggesting knowledge of surveillance blind spots. London recalibrated satellite sweeps, sending additional assets to cover potential gaps. A tense dialogue crackled over encrypted lines. Observation priority confirmed. Unknown operative may be reconnaissance or direct threat. Maintain overwatch. As hours wore on, analysts began to identify patterns that suggested a double layer of deception within the network. Signals hinted at coordination beyond the previously mapped cells. Multiple convoys converged, then dispersed, leaving digital traces that suggested deliberate obfuscation. The operative remained motionless, recording the courier's repeated visits and subtle interactions with the unknown figure. Each step, each pause, each whispered instruction carried weight. One misread signal could unravel the entire operation. In London, the liaison leaned over the console, eyes scanning overlays, comparing satellite data with field updates. They've adapted their movements. Signals are inconsistent with prior patterns. Prepare contingency if extraction or intervention is needed. Analysts worked in silent synchronization, predicting routes, calculating potential outcomes, and preparing for the unknown operative's next move. Every detail fed into a living map, constantly updated, constantly recalibrated. Then, a revelation. The unknown operative was not acting alone. Signals suggested coordination with elements already identified within the network. The implications were immediate and chilling. The network was no longer isolated. It had external support, a sophistication previously underestimated. London updated allied agencies, field operatives repositioned, and the operative in Beirut readied for rapid observation adjustments. The desert seemed to pulse with tension, a silent battlefield of information, movement, and hidden intent. The operative in Beirut noted a subtle gesture, a brief nod exchanged between the courier and the unknown figure. That single action suggested an alliance, a shared understanding that could compromise the observer's ability to predict the network's movements. He whispered into the earpiece, confirmed coordination, unknown operative aligned with convoy nodes, recommend expanded overwatch and contingency planning. London acknowledged, and analysts expanded coverage, tracking every variable, aware that even the smallest oversight could trigger operational collapse. Throughout the night, the operative maintained his vigil, every sense on high alert. Patterns emerged and shifted, signals flickered, convoys diverged, and the unknown operative moved with deliberate intent. The network revealed new complexity, and the observers adapted in real time, tracing nodes, decoding signals, and anticipating contingencies. The liaison murmured to himself, "This is no longer just surveillance. This is a test of our precision, patience, and judgment." Every heartbeat, every transmission, every motion became a critical piece of the unfolding puzzle. By dawn, the first threads of understanding emerged. Multiple cells were coordinated. A previously unseen leadership node had been detected, and the unknown operative had successfully integrated with the network, leaving observers to anticipate the next critical move. London recalibrated all assets, field operatives adjusted positions, and analysts projected potential next steps for the network. The stage was set for the operation's next phase, a tense ballet of shadows, signals, and human resolve that would determine whether months of intelligence gathering could culminate in decisive action or unravel into chaos. As the sun's first rays began to illuminate the desert, the operative in Beirut withdrew silently to a secondary observation point, earpiece alive with encrypted chatter, knowing that the coming hours would be critical. The unknown operative remained in motion, the network continued to adapt, and London coordinated a global web of observation that stretched across continents. The night had revealed both opportunities and threats, but the operation was far from over. Every mind in the field and the operations center understood one immutable truth. Intelligence was a living war, and the shadows held secrets that could either protect or destroy them all. Dawn had barely broken when London's operations center began to hum with renewed intensity. The satellite overlays flickered with updated coordinates, and analysts worked in synchronized silence, eyes darting across screens filled with grids, moving dots, and intercepted signals. The unknown operative had not been sighted for several hours, yet his presence lingered like a ghost in the data, invisible but influential, and every movement traced ripples through the carefully constructed network of observation. The liaison leaned over the console, scanning cross-referenced HUMINT reports from multiple assets, noting inconsistencies in some of the Amman and Beirut updates. Something felt off. A subtle misalignment between field reports and satellite movements that did not fit established patterns. A quiet alert chimed. The liaison's eyes narrowed as he read the message from a trusted source embedded in the northern sector. Courier reports deviations, certain assets behaving irregularly, cross-verification recommended. Fingers tapped rapidly on the keyboard, bringing up encrypted communications from the same sector over the past week. Patterns emerged that hinted at more than operational error. One asset had been feeding false location updates, subtly shifting convoy movements and giving the network small but significant advantages. London froze the map overlays, the realization dawning. A double agent had infiltrated their intelligence chain. The operative in Beirut, still monitoring from his secondary observation point, noted the anomalies immediately. Instructions relayed from London had directed him to anticipate convoy routes and contact points that no longer aligned with on-the-ground reality. He whispered into the earpiece, voice tight. Discrepancies noted. Predicted coordinates are off. I repeat, predicted coordinates do not match actual convoy movement. Potential compromised asset. Back in London, the liaison's jaw tightened. The revelation was both dangerous and subtle. One compromised asset could distort the entire intelligence picture, creating blind spots that a network as sophisticated as this could exploit. Across the Mediterranean, the network remained oblivious to the eyes watching them, yet their own internal coordination hinted at awareness. Subtle adjustments in convoy timings and altered communication sequences suggested that they were testing both the network's security and the observer's vigilance. Analysts in London cross-referenced the anomalies with historical HUMINT and SIGINT data, tracing small but deliberate deviations back to a field agent whose identity had always seemed impeccable. The liaison leaned back, staring at the screen, calculating the potential fallout. The double agent had operated quietly, blending into operational routines for weeks, feeding selective truth while embedding misleading details that threatened to misalign entire operations. The operative in Beirut adjusted his scope, scanning the convoy as it slowed near a cluster of industrial ruins. He saw subtle hand signals exchanged, tiny pauses in movement, and gestures that spoke volumes in a silent code. Each action was being mirrored in London's overlays, analysts tracing every dot, anticipating the chain of events that would unfold in minutes. The double agent's interference introduced additional layers of complexity, and the liaison issued rapid instructions. Confirm all field assets, reconcile anomalies, prioritize visual confirmation before executing any action. Fingers flew over keyboards, cross-referencing signals and satellite imagery in a desperate attempt to regain control of the operational picture. Meanwhile, the network continued to evolve. From hidden vantage points, leadership figures orchestrated convoy movements, redistributed assets, and conducted silent communication checks. The operative noted with precision the arrival of vehicles that had not been previously scheduled, carrying materials that could indicate logistic consolidation or intelligence transmission. Each movement was significant, and the operative recorded every gesture, sound, and shadow, knowing that London's analysts were piecing together patterns that could unravel months of carefully guarded secrecy. Then, a subtle but critical change occurred. The unknown operative, previously blending seamlessly with the network, split from the convoy, moving toward a small, isolated building on the outskirts of the industrial zone. His intent was not immediately clear, but the implications were chilling. London's liaison recognized the significance instantly. The unknown operative had the skill and knowledge to manipulate internal dynamics, potentially interacting with the double agent to distort intelligence flows further. Analysts cross-referenced patterns, tracking movement across multiple channels, anticipating possible rendezvous points, and preparing contingency instructions for the field operative. The field operative remained in position, monitoring both convoys and the unknown operative. He observed a brief exchange between the courier and the intruder, their gestures precise, controlled, and unmistakably coordinated. A sudden realization struck him. The network's sophistication had been underestimated. They were no longer merely reacting to surveillance. They were actively manipulating it, testing responses, and probing for weaknesses. London's analysts, upon receiving the feed, began recalibrating predictions, overlaying historical data with live observations to anticipate the network's next moves. Tension in the field rose sharply. The operative noticed a brief flicker of recognition between a convoy driver and a previously unobserved individual. His mind raced. Was this a local informant, a network mole, or part of the unknown operative's team? He relayed the observation to London. Potential insider engagement observed. Unknown operative coordinating with convoy assets. The liaison's response was immediate. Maintain distance, update every minute, prepare extraction contingency if engagement is imminent. Analysts redirected satellite coverage, SIGINT sweeps, and HUMINT focus to cover multiple potential outcomes, aware that the network's adaptability could exploit the slightest lapse. Inside the industrial building, leadership figures moved with quiet urgency, reviewing logistics, supplies, and the flow of information. Subtle shifts in body language suggested internal unease, perhaps sensing an unseen presence or anticipating disruption. The operative noted every pause, every glance, every recalibration of position, feeding London updates that would be analyzed in real time. The double agent's interference had created a layer of uncertainty. Every movement, previously predictable, now required constant reassessment. Hours of observation revealed further anomalies. Certain field assets reported minor but repeated inconsistencies in convoy locations, timing, and routing. Analysts began mapping these deviations against the unknown operative's observed movements, hypothesizing potential objectives: sabotage, intelligence gathering, or recruitment of internal assets. The liaison understood the implications immediately. A coordinated interaction between the unknown operative and the double agent could unravel months of surveillance, compromise critical nodes, and endanger operatives in the field. In Beirut, the operative adjusted his position again, keeping the warehouse between himself and the convoy while observing the unknown operative's movements. He noted the individual's methodical approach, every step deliberate, every action silent yet meaningful. London's analysts cross-referenced previous encounters, satellite trails, and SIGINT patterns, attempting to determine the operative's origin, training, and potential objective. Every calculation carried risk. A misinterpretation could compromise observation, field assets, and operational integrity. The unknown operative paused briefly at the building's entrance, scanning the surrounding terrain with practiced ease. The operative in Beirut sensed instinctively that this was a decisive moment. The intruder's actions could determine the next phase of the network's operations. He whispered into his earpiece, unknown operative positioned for engagement, awaiting further instructions, multiple contingencies in place. London responded immediately, issuing encrypted instructions across the network. Maintain Overwatch, do not intervene unless imminent threat confirmed, reconfirm all field asset positions and integrity. Suddenly, signals analysts detected a flurry of encrypted communications originating from the northern sector. Frequency hopping and unusual bursts suggested that the double agent was actively coordinating with the unknown operative. London's liaison realized the severity of the situation. The operations intelligence chain had been partially compromised, forcing analysts and field operatives to operate under extreme uncertainty. Adjustments were made in real time, surveillance patterns recalculated, field operative positions shifted, and contingency overlays prepared for rapid extraction or engagement. The operative in Beirut moved cautiously, documenting the subtle exchange between the unknown operative and local assets. Gestures, nods, and pauses indicated an alignment that had not been anticipated. Analysts cross-referenced the visual feeds with intercepted communications, attempting to decode intent. Each minute stretched with suspense, the weight of potential exposure pressing down like the desert sun at high noon. The network had evolved, testing observers, probing vulnerabilities, and exploiting internal weaknesses. As midday approached, the unknown operative merged with the convoy, disappearing into the building's interior. Field operatives and analysts held their collective breath, aware that the next movements would define operational outcomes. London's liaison directed a full review of all assets, instructing analysts to trace every interaction, anticipate potential fallout, and prepare for immediate operational recalibration. The double agent's actions had amplified risk, and the unknown operative's integration into the network introduced further complexity. By late afternoon, patterns began to emerge. Analysts identified the critical nodes of coordination: the courier, the unknown operative, and the double agent's communication channels. These nodes became the focus of attention, each observation feeding predictive models, satellite sweeps, and field instructions. The liaison recognized that action, timing, and precision would be essential. The network's adaptability meant that any intervention had to account for multiple contingencies and countermeasures. The operative in Beirut remained vigilant, eyes tracking every movement within the building and the surrounding convoy, noting gestures, timing, and coordination. London's analysts overlaid historical HUMINT with SIGINT and live satellite data, reconstructing a model of the network's operational behavior and predicting potential next steps. The unknown operative and the double agent had introduced an unforeseen layer of complexity, yet the observers adapted, calculating probabilities, anticipating reactions, and preparing for the next phase of engagement. The day drew to a close, the desert casting long shadows across industrial ruins, vehicles, and silent figures. The operative withdrew to a concealed position, earpiece alive with encrypted chatter, recording every detail, aware that the next hours would be critical. London remained alert, analysts working tirelessly to reconcile anomalies, decode communications, and maintain operational control. The network had revealed new depth. The double agent had distorted prior assumptions, and the unknown operative had integrated seamlessly, leaving observers to anticipate the network's next decisive move. The operation had reached a new phase. Intelligence flows were partially compromised. Field operatives faced heightened risk, and every decision carried immense consequences. Yet, through tension, calculation, and relentless observation, the web of surveillance and counterintelligence continued to expand, each thread a potential pathway to unravel the network, or risk it slipping beyond reach entirely. In the shadows, the unknown operative moved with purpose. The double agent's influence lingered, and London's observers prepared for the critical moments that would define the next chapter in the Northern Watch Redux. Night fell again over the industrial zone, and the operative in Beirut adjusted his position with meticulous care. Every movement had been mapped in his mind, every shadow noted, every detail of the terrain memorized. The unknown operative, previously integrated with the convoy, had split once more, moving toward a side entrance that led to a hidden interior courtyard. The double agent's influence lingered in every transmission, every misaligned report, leaving observers to navigate a maze of half-truths and deliberate misdirection. London's analysts, aware of the stakes, overlaid satellite imagery, HUMINT feeds, and field observations, reconstructing the network's pathways and anticipating potential points of vulnerability. Inside the building, the network's leaders moved with quiet urgency, unaware of the eyes that traced them from continents away. The operative observed a small exchange of packages, a briefcase, a satchel, a coded device. Each item carried significance. Each interaction revealed patterns that analysts could use to anticipate the network's next move. He recorded every gesture, every pause, every interaction, feeding the live data stream back to London. The liaison's fingers flew over keyboards, marking coordinates, recalculating probabilities, and preparing contingencies for both immediate intervention and prolonged observation. Suddenly, the unknown operative emerged from the courtyard, slipping into the shadows with a package under his arm. The operative in Beirut held his breath, noting the methodical precision, the silent grace that betrayed experience and training. London received the feed instantly, analysts cross-referencing prior SIGINT with field observation, noting slight deviations in timing and route that suggested the unknown operative was manipulating both the network and the observers simultaneously. The liaison issued rapid instructions. Track operative, predict next rendezvous, prepare extraction points, do not engage unless imminent threat confirmed. In the building, the double agent's subtle signals became apparent. Small adjustments in convoy timing, minor changes in asset handling, and selective misreporting revealed an intricate game of deception. Analysts traced these anomalies back to the compromised asset, piecing together evidence of deliberate manipulation. The network's leaders remained unaware of the breach, yet their operational efficiency had begun to falter under the weight of unseen interference. London's coordination with allied agencies intensified. SIGINT and HUMINT feeds synchronized, and field operatives adjusted positions to cover potential blind spots created by the double agent. The operative in Beirut shadowed the unknown operative through narrow corridors and industrial alcoves. Each step carried risk. One wrong move could expose him to observation or engagement by the network. He noted subtle gestures, fleeting glances, and the rhythm of movement, every detail feeding London's predictive models. Satellite overlays showed shifts in convoy routes, minor detours designed to test surveillance coverage, while SIGINT bursts revealed short, coded communications with unknown external nodes. The liaison's voice crackled through the earpiece. Monitor all ingress and egress, identify high-value contacts, maintain overwatch. Hours passed with relentless intensity. The operative tracked the unknown operative into a side building previously unmapped in HUMINT reports. Inside, leadership figures convened briefly, exchanging information, supplies, and subtle directives. Gestures indicated hierarchy, while coded devices moved silently between hands. The unknown operative observed quietly, integrating information, potentially manipulating events in ways unseen. The field operative noted every movement, every hesitation, every pause that suggested internal tension or operational conflict. London's analysts updated the overlays, marking probable objectives and potential extraction routes, fully aware that any miscalculation could compromise the entire operation. Then came the first confrontation. Two local assets, apparently loyal to the network, approached the unknown operative from opposite directions. The operative in Beirut froze, watching as subtle gestures, coded signals, and micro-movements played out like a silent ballet. The unknown operative, anticipating the convergence, shifted position slightly, blending with shadows and manipulating the scene to avoid detection. London's liaison issued rapid instructions. Do not engage, observe intent, record all interactions. Analysts cross-referenced prior movements, SIGINT bursts, and field observations to reconstruct the potential outcomes in real time. The network's leadership continued internal coordination, unaware that their patterns had been compromised both by the unknown operative and by the double agent feeding false intelligence. Convoys shifted, assets repositioned, and coded signals flew, each movement calculated to test surveillance coverage and operational response. The operative in Beirut moved carefully, following the unknown operative while maintaining concealment, capturing evidence of hierarchy, communication, and subtle misalignments caused by the double agent's interference. London processed the feeds, updating predictive models and preparing multiple contingency plans for the next phase of engagement. In a narrow alley behind the building, the unknown operative paused, exchanging a brief nod with a high-value courier. The operative in Beirut noted the precision. Gestures, timing, and alignment suggested coordination unknown to previous HUMINT assessments. London's analysts adjusted overlays, incorporating the interaction into predictive simulations, anticipating potential next steps. The double agent's influence complicated calculations. Deliberate misdirection had forced analysts to consider multiple scenarios simultaneously. Then came the decisive moment. The unknown operative retrieved a small package from the courier, slipping it into a hidden compartment of a vehicle scheduled for imminent departure. The operative in Beirut recorded every detail, aware that this movement could reveal critical intelligence on the network's logistics, hierarchy, and planning methods. London issued instructions to allied agencies, coordinating aerial observation, satellite sweeps, and SIGINT interception in a synchronized effort to trace the package and anticipate its destination. Every second became a test of timing, judgment, and precision. As night deepened, the network's internal coordination began to fray under the compounded pressures of surveillance, manipulation, and internal betrayal. Small hesitations, unexpected pauses, and minor errors suggested that the double agent's influence and the unknown operative's presence were creating instability. The operative in Beirut observed subtle exchanges that could indicate internal distrust, while London's analysts modeled potential outcomes, preparing to capitalize on emerging vulnerabilities. Finally, the unknown operative disappeared into a vehicle, merging with convoy traffic, leaving the field operative in the shadows, the earpiece alive with encrypted chatter. London's liaison directed a coordinated sweep, integrating HUMINT, SIGINT, and satellite coverage, aware that the network's next moves would define the success or failure of months of painstaking observation. Analysts traced every movement, calculated probabilities, and adjusted extraction points for both the unknown operative and field assets. By dawn, the operation had reached a critical turning point. The double agent's deception had created openings. The unknown operative's precise maneuvers had revealed key network nodes, and London's coordination with allied agencies had positioned surveillance to capitalize on emerging vulnerabilities. The stage was set for the next decisive phase: targeted interception, intelligence extraction, and potential neutralization of critical nodes, all while maintaining operational secrecy and field safety. The operative in Beirut withdrew to a concealed location, aware that the coming hours would demand precision, patience, and adaptability. London's analysts continued to process data, overlaying movements, signals, and behaviors to anticipate the network's next decisions. Shadows shifted, convoys moved, and silent actors remained unseen yet pivotal. The Northern Watch Redux operation had reached a critical crescendo, and the network's unraveling, or survival, hung in delicate balance, awaiting the next strategic move in a war of observation, deception, and intelligence. The plan moved with surgical quiet, not a raid blaring into the night, but a series of concentric moves meant to choke the network's options without announcing what had been seen. London fed refined coordinates to Allied controllers, SIGINT teams locked on the courier's device, and a NATO reconnaissance node swept the anticipated exit corridors. Field teams repositioned into dark margins of towns and along desert tracks, the kind of places where a man could disappear if he knew the shadows as well as the stones. The operative in Beirut watched the convoy's last known formation dissolve into narrower roads, tracking the vehicle that had held the package, noting registration idiosyncrasies and listening for the cadence of an engine that would betray weight or modification. His fingers were steady. His training was steady. Still, the air around him thrummed with the knowledge that nothing in this game moved along neat lines. They never intended to storm the building. The objective was extraction. Take the package, intercept the courier, flip the double agent's channels, and collapse the logistical thread that tied several cells together. The liaison authorized a short window, 40 minutes of synchronized action measured against satellite sweeps, drone recon, and field positioning. Too slow, and the convoy would melt into 1,000 separate roads. Too fast, and they might stumble into a trap crafted to buy the network time to vanish. Decisions were made on probabilities, not certainties, and in that calculus, the smallest advantage could turn the tide. An Allied team shadowed the targeted vehicle as it dipped into a narrow wadi that funneled into a cluster of ruined warehouses. The satellite view pinned the convoy's geometry. SIGINT confirmed a short burst of encrypted chatter, then silence, an unnatural pause as if the network itself had drawn breath and decided to hold it. The courier, now the axis of everything they had watched for weeks, parked near a side door and disappeared into the belly of a hollowed warehouse. Eyes tracked him, feet waited. The operative in Beirut tightened his grip and crawled through a low opening to gain a blind angle on a service entrance. Inside, the air smelled of oil and old paper. Men moved with the low certainty of those who had spent too many nights avoiding something worse than sleep. The unknown operative, who had moved within the network like a ghost for days, stood between two crates, a small package at his feet, hands empty and unremarkable. The courier stepped forward and slid the package into his hands, as if passing a mundane object. In the exchange, there was neither furtiveness nor extravagance, only a quiet competence that said this was part of a larger order, not a one-off errand. The operative in Beirut took it all in, whispering coordinates and minute descriptions. London's analysts fed overlays to a tactical node that, in turn, fed instructions to a soft interdiction team waiting outside. They moved like a whisper. A small team breached an alley, non-lethal options primed, communications jammed to prevent a panic-driven broadcast. The courier was restrained with minimal fuss. The unknown operative pivoted and walked toward an exit, as if accustomed to being disturbed. He passed within arm's reach of the operative in Beirut, who, by design, did not make his presence known. Instead, he watched the operative's face, calm, practiced, a mouth that smiled once, as if acknowledging a script only he had read. The man's eyes flicked briefly, a detail only a seasoned watcher would catch. An old scar at the temple, a tiny silver stud in his left ear, the way his shoulders relaxed when the courier was taken aside. London's liaison froze the frame and circled the face, comparing it to a database of known instructors, trainers, and false identities. Something imperative lodged in the analyst's throat. This was not merely a courier or field operative. This was someone who taught such men how to be invisible. They extracted the package. Inside were not explosives, as some had feared, but a set of encrypted drives and a stack of handwritten ledgers, meticulous lists of routes, drop points, payments, and a catalog of pseudonyms tied to bank accounts and shell companies dotted across cities from Casablanca to Karachi. The drives hummed with layers of encryption that SIGINT teams cheerfully broke apart like nested shells, revealing intercepted correspondence, satellite-synced timestamps, and references to meetings that had not yet occurred. The ledgers, when translated and matched against bank records, spelled out a logistics backbone that connected safe houses, procurement cells, and a funding stream funneled through trade companies in 3 countries. The double agent's fingerprints were there too, subtle notations, intentionally contradicted entries, and timestamps designed to create safe illusions. Analysts in London grinned briefly and then set to work, because in this world there was no satisfaction, only more work. They fed the data outward in controlled bursts. A strike team neutralized a secondary depot before it could disperse its contents. A diplomatic channel froze accounts tied to bogus trading firms. Local law enforcement, carefully vetted and quietly informed, rounded up drivers and low-level facilitators. In the operations center, the liaison watched the cascading results, each action like a press on a carefully balanced mechanism that, when turned slightly, redistributed stress across the system. It was not all clean. In one town, a raid produced panicked civilians and a brief firefight. In another, a driver vanished into the dark before agents could reach him, but the net tightened. The courier, cooperative under pressure, began to reveal names when confronted with the combined weight of evidence and the quiet certainty of those who had been caught. The double agent, whose little deviations had once been merely an irritation, became a central pivot. When analysts traced the channels of his false reports, they noticed a repeating pattern. He had been nudging certain convoys toward particular safe paths and delaying others, creating pockets where surveillance thinned. Confronted with the ledger evidence and the courier's testimony, it became clear he had been doing more than mislead. He had been selling time and space to an external patron. The liaison weighed the options. Public exposure would blow a web of assets. Quiet extraction could allow a deeper probe into who had contracted him. They chose both. They arrested the man quietly, transported him through a series of back channels, and simultaneously turned his lines into a controlled feed, feeding false signals back to the network to watch whom it trusted next. As evidence mounted, a portrait of the network's architecture formed, not the ragged, ideologically driven cells of old, but a hybrid of local militancy and foreign expertise, a blended operation that used old loyalties to mask new, mercenary connections. Satellite intel showed previously hidden safe houses, SIGINT revealed code words tied to international brokers, and HUMINT exposed a recruitment pipeline that fed not only fighters, but technicians, men who could move hardware, manipulate signals, and craft plausible paper trails. The scope widened, and with it came ethical questions that had no tidy answers. How many innocents were complicit by necessity? How many were manipulated, and how many would be collateral in the strategic trimming of the network? They did not pretend to resolve those questions. The mission was tactical, not philosophical. Still, there were quieter judgments made in the margins. A local handler allowed to slip away because his cooperation bought 20 critical IDs. A safe house burned to prevent future use, though it housed a family who swore they were unaware. A courier given leniency in exchange for testimony that would stitch together a broader pattern. Each choice left a residue, moral debts that agents tucked away like small wounds to be treated later, if at all. By the third day, the network skeleton lay exposed in digital and paper form. Arrests rippled through 3 countries, shipments were curtailed, and a number of mid-level operatives chose exile or disappearance over capture. The unknown operative, the instructor, escaped in the confusion, slipping through a narrow route that had once been flagged as a surveillance blind spot. Analysts cursed and traced his path until it dissolved into a mesh of transit points and forged documents. Even as praise circulated in brief private communications for a job that had prevented the probable staging of larger operations, the operative in Beirut and everyone in the operations center knew the truth. Severing one head did not kill the beast. It only revealed how many others were grafted to the same body. They regrouped. They tightened watch on the remaining nodes. They turned the double agent's channels into a slow leak, seeding disinformation to watch its distribution and the network's reaction. A pattern emerged. The network reacted, redirected, and adapted, but now at a slower pace, constrained by disrupted logistics and a thinning pool of trusted couriers. In one intercepted conversation, a mid-level leader swore that the teacher would return and that new routes would be opened. In another, a financier panicked, pulling back funds and calling auditors to account for anomalies. The ripple effect was real. Lives in the network scrambled. Operations that once seemed inevitable slowed. For a moment, intelligence felt like victory. Yet, the last lines of the recovered ledgers carried a notation that chilled the liaison's fingers as he traced it. A list of names coded with dates years into the future. An archive of sleeper identities and safe points established not for immediate use, but as a long game. The handwriting was precise and deliberate. The implication was brutal and simple. Disruption could buy years, but not eternity. The network had planned not only for survival, but for patience. They closed out the operation with measured statements, careful debriefs, and a quiet redistribution of resources. Allies exchanged nods behind closed doors. Field operatives went home to faces that asked questions they could not answer. In London, the liaison lingered over the last feeds, watching as satellite images of the warehouses were archived and encrypted as logins were closed and accounts suspended. He thought of the operative in Beirut, of the courier who had spoken, and the double agent who had betrayed for reasons half economic and half ideological. He thought of the unknown operative who had walked past without being touched, of the scar, the silver stud, the smile that suggested he had always been one step ahead. They had won a battle. They had prevented something dangerous from fermenting into something worse. Yet, intelligence is not a series of endings. It is a string of measures that delay, deter, and sometimes, purely by luck, prevent catastrophe. The ledgers promised that hidden threads remained, patient and lethal, waiting for the moment when attention drifted and the world turned away. In the quiet after-action, when reports were filed and commendations scheduled, but not yet given, the liaison sent a final encrypted message to the operative in Beirut, an instruction to stand down, to debrief, to rest if he could. The reply was a single line that carried no boasting and no relief. "We cut one line, the sea remains." The liaison read it twice, then folded the message into a drawer of other dark paper, files that would be opened again when the next signal flickered, the next convoy moved, and the next shadow chose to step out of the dark. The operation had a legacy, a map redrawn, a network weakened, a teacher still at large, and the knowledge that the watch must continue. The Northern Watch Redux operation may have ended, but the shadows never rest. Hidden networks, unseen operatives, and silent betrayals continue to shape global events in ways most will never know. What secrets still linger? Which agents are watching? And who is orchestrating from the darkness? If you thought this story was intense, hit that like button, subscribe to Chronicles of Sleep, and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss our next deep dive into the world of covert operations, espionage, and the intelligence that shapes history. Drop a comment below. Which operative do you think had the most impact in this operation? The unknown operative, the double agent, or the field operative in Beirut? Let's see what you think. From the shadows to the screens, this is Chronicles of Sleep, signing off.